working on the idea that pain is protection, pain is a threat. Every emotion has a physical representation. So if you spend a long time in an emotion, that will shut down some parts of your body, maybe open up others, and that will undoubtedly be one of the things that's holding you in a pain pattern. If something's not working for you, you're the captain of the ship.
Welcome to Mindset, Mood and Movement, a systemic approach to human behavior, performance and well-being. Hello and welcome. The body and the mind are one system. As you regular listeners of my show know, that's how I see things. And I see that the world of coaching and human performance is fragmented. Now, when you go to someone for a pain in your shoulder, a lower back issue, or a niggly knee, you might see a sports massage therapist, a physio, someone like that, and they may treat that area. But I have the fortune of working with Jamie, who's a sports therapist who treats the whole system. Now, he's worked on me, so I know firsthand how Jamie looks at things in the body and may not be the expected view of how you work with the physical body. So if you have pain, if you have challenges, you have mental blocks, today, this one's a good one for you. So we're going to get into it. Jamie, welcome to Mindset, Mood and Movement Show. It's good to have you on.
Thanks for reminding me, Sal. Really looking forward to it.
Pleasure. Yeah, pleasure. Jamie, take us through what do you do through your day? When you're with people, what do you actually do?
Well, so in terms of the work that I do, I think the key thing is to say it's bespoke for every person. I think that's one of my big drivers, my big beliefs. We at the clinic we talk about meeting people exactly where they're at. So to give you an over-the-top example, if someone comes in having searched out a physiotherapy type search term online, and come in with a knee problem, and there's a realization just from my experience that the flippant way of saying it, and I've never said this to a client, is it's not your knee that's the problem, it's your entire life. You don't want to hear that, really. But it's about, from that point, starting from a physical start point, say this knee case in point, and then seeing where that takes us. We always start, because my qualification is a sports therapy. I'm not trying to be a psychologist, but it's really important that we acknowledge the mental aspect. So we get to know the people in the room, talk about life. It's really important that our clients are able to be as open as they can be. Sometimes it's difficult to be open with someone you've just met, and obviously that rapport develops through treatment. So we kind of gain the trust on the physical side of things. Using our biomechanical expertise, and as you alluded to in the introduction, piecing it all together. We might be, for a knee problem, we'd certainly be looking at what's going on the foot, at the hip, at the pelvis, but even all the way up to the neck. And been plenty of cases whereby we've seen dramatic improvement in people's symptoms by, even releasing off someone's jaw, for example, and it positively affects the symptoms in their knee. So yeah, that's a brief outline.
So what's super interesting about you, Jamie, is that, so I came to see you a while back, and I've, for our listeners, I've had this kind of recurrent shoulder issue for quite a long time, and I've done a lot of work on it. I've done my own rehab. I've got a lot of knowledge about the body, not as much as Jamie, but a lot to kind of do my self-work. I've seen other practitioners, and it just hasn't resolved. And what struck me was, if you've got a chronic issue, then when I went to Jamie, he was like, it's probably not a shoulder issue because it would have healed by now. If it's going on for that long, it's not about your shoulder. And it resonated with me because when I'm in a coaching space with someone and they are wanting to change how they think and they're trying to do behavioral change, it's not about the behavior. So I'm already seeing things in these parallel views. So I might look at someone's belief pattern and the architecture of their mind. And Jamie, you look at people in the architecture of their body, but there is such a crossover. No one has a mind without a body. Everyone lives through a body. Now, if you're looking at someone, like you said there, the person comes in like me with a shoulder or knee issue and says, hey, I've got this problem, can you help? What's some of the stuff that you're seeing that isn't physical? Because, of course, for those of us who've got the physical, we think that's the issue. But what is it you will see are patterns and trends that come in with some of your clients that are more likely part of the pain problem or the injury problem that you're seeing?
Yeah, sure. Would it be okay to talk about your condition in more detail, Sal, just because I can physically see you?
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm a live case, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's the one that I can see right now. I haven't got my notes in front of me, so it'll all be from memory. But on a purely physical level, I think I've made a career out of treating what looks most wonky. Very technical. You see it in all the textbooks. But now, for example, in your case, as I remember it, we have a right shoulder issue, and I'm less interested in giving things labels. I'm more interested about what we can do about things. I think a critique of, got some textbooks on my shelves up there, and the pages and pages of these labels that don't actually mean anything. I mean, to use your case as an example, we could have labeled them, if we wish, a tendinopathy or something like that, which if you translate the Latin just means there's something wrong with the tendon. Now, we don't know that, and we're just going to label, and labels can be very negative, I think. You've got something to say, there's something wrong with me, and I don't think that is helpful. Also, I mean, tendinopathy is a really good example. It used to be called tendinitis. You might have heard of that. It was inflammation of the tendon, and they showed, well, actually, there's no inflammation, so that was wrong. Then they showed that it was tendinosis, which suggested degeneration of the tendon, which isn't necessarily the case either. So you can have degeneration of the tendon and no pain, and that's very, very common in all of us. And so that's why they came with the label tendinopathy. There's something wrong with the tendon, but is there? And this is where you start getting into the pain science of it as well. You can have, what we would consider physical issues in the tissues is the phrase that we use, but actually no pain at all. But equally, you can have no issues in the tissues and pain as well. So to bring it back to you, your point, the first thing I picked up with yourself through that right side, we knew where the issue was. We knew that there was some pain on some movements. I can't remember the actual one, some rotator cuff, most likely. I think some press ups as well. So that gave us a clue as to the actual muscles that were involved in the pain mechanism, if you like. And then we had a look at you, and then we had a look at how you were lining up. And the two things that I noticed was I'm overly obsessed with people's armpits. I'm a bit special like that. So we had a look at we took a little picture of you from the back, and we got the ruler, the iPhone feature, very useful for me. And we saw that the right shoulder, I think, was lower than the left shoulder. So something's pulled down on the right side. And with yourself, which is a really, really common double whammy, is we saw that on that same right side, the pelvis was elevated. So again, same, you can use the ruler as well. You can do it by eye as well. I like to take pictures with the client's consent, of course, just so they're involved in the process as well, so they can see what's going on. And we could see that it was, if you like it, on the side of everybody, it was the shoulder was down and the pelvis was up. So we had some short tissues here. And then I used my biomechanical knowledge. Okay, what muscles are bridging that gap? What muscles could be pulling you into that position? And kind of, we then go from there. With yourself, Sal, this wasn't the case, but it can be the case with many people. It is, because I know you're super open to it based on your own, past experience. But one of the things, and again, if I speak to more conventional therapists, or going back, the view, people say, "Oh, I'm a big believer in the hands-on work," and many people say, "Well, you can't change anything," and well, they're probably right. From a pure physiological, if you've got a tendon with degeneration, can I change that? Well, no, not really. Certainly not there and then. Maybe we can over time if things improve. But what you can do certainly is, say you have a belief, and a belief that is unhelpful or negative. If you believe that your pain is due to a damaged tendon, then we need to address that belief. Now, the way of doing that would be to say, okay, well, as much as we did with you, just kind of reinforce that message. Physiological healing time is 6 weeks. So if you had damaged it, and we talk about the original mechanism of injury, did anything go twang, snap or pop? Now, if anything doesn't go twang, snap or pop, we can be reasonably sure that nothing was wrong with it, really. It's, the pain started at some point. The actual tissues were probably very similar the day before, at the point where they felt pain. There might have been an increased load. And key thing is there might have been an increase, we call it increased stress, maybe might be a nicer way of framing it, because increased stress suggests increased physical stress, which absolutely can be a factor, but increased emotional stress as well. And that can be a factor. So yeah, correcting those beliefs that aren't helpful. And it's all good and well saying that and me coming out with my spiel and stuff that I believe based on pain science, experience and biomechanics. But then the hands-on work for me is invaluable in that if I release, and you might intellectually, and you were on the same page straight away, Sal, of course, but intellectually you get what I'm saying. But if I can use my hands, use the techniques that I've got to then make you feel a difference there and then you start to believe. And what we've done there is we've affected a mental change, and that change happens there and then. And I think that's the most kind of powerful way to work.
Yeah, that's just so interesting. And thanks for elaborating that. So just for a bit of extra context for our listener, I've had this ongoing shoulder pain for more than a year. Now, I train a lot. As you listen regularly, you'll know I do a lot of training, weight training, and I'm in reasonably good condition. And it just one day was just fried. The shoulder just did not want to work. And the things it never healed. And I did loads of dedicated rehab work, micro movements on the rotator cuffs. And when I spoke to Jamie, as he's alluded to, it's not quote unquote a tendon problem. This is something else in the system. And of course, piques my interest because when I look at systemic change in people, I'm like, oh yes, that's of course. I see this in the mental side of things. But yeah, I think one of the experiences you led to there, and I want to name this, is the distinction between beliefs and experience. I know for a fact that it's really hard to challenge beliefs. It's what I do on a daily basis. I challenge people's beliefs to help them change. But we believe what we believe, and they're sticky. They're really sticky beliefs. And the way our predictive brain works, it needs to have trust and evidence in quite good measure to update that belief. So if you don't really trust the person you're telling who's saying, hey, you haven't got any pain in the shoulder, really, it's probably something else. If you don't trust them, you're not going to buy it. But if you don't have an experience, a valid experiential, whether you feel different, you see different, whatever it is, then again, that doesn't shift the belief. And I think that's so interesting what you said. The experiential change by your hands-on work, the naming of the potential, like, is this a belief issue as well? And I've seen other people with these, quote, problems, and they don't ever get resolved. And of course, I'm sort of scratching my head thinking, well, is that an emotional pattern for you? And just to note, I used to do a bit more of the therapeutic side of my work rather than only the coaching. And I had a physio friend back in the day. And he sometimes referred people to me who he could not treat. They kept coming back with, I still got a hip problem. My hip flexor's, firing badly or something like that. And he was smart enough to know that, yeah, this is probably an emotional pattern. And then I would have the conversation around it. What's been going on with you? What's in your backstory? Well, tell me something in confidence. And I'd hear something about an echo from trauma, a difficult time, something that's happened to this individual. And quote unquote, it was expressing through the body. So I think if you're listening now and you've got some physical stuff, be curious. Be curious. Is this more than just a niggly knee or tricky back? Is there something else going on? So now we've uncovered that, Jamie, what else? So pain really interests me because pain is fascinating. It's subjective. It's in the nervous system. It's very complex and you understand it very well. But what is pain? Let's understand what is pain. So those of us who experience headaches, backaches, whatever it is, what are we experiencing?
Wow. Okay. The book's written on this, Sal. So thank you for that. Thank you for that question. So what is pain? So there's lots of different theories, I guess, on what pain is really. And you'd think there'd be an absolute answer and there really isn't. So obviously you've got the pain where you've just, walked into the drawers at home and banged your shin, which is pretty damn painful. And it's that's a very physical stimulus. And I think probably to cut a lot of kind of pain science, neuroscience short and summarize a lot of the theories and a lot of the books that I read, there's a few pain definitions that I use, and I haven't got them right in front of me at the moment, but I'll kind of summarize them. And we're really working on the idea that pain pain is protection. Pain is a threat. So there's a fascinating, the work of Louis Gifford. Any listeners interested in following this further, I recommend his work highly. And he works on one of his ideas of pain is the mature organisms model, which is basically that if you look at a single cell, and a single cell, if there's a noxious stimulus to a single cell, it knows to go in the opposite direction. Equally, if it's a stimulus that it likes, it knows to go towards that. And this is, again, another book that I'm reading at the moment, The Biology of Belief by Bruce Lipton, another fabulous book, which is a microbiologist and goes into a little more detail. And so somehow, without going into detail, microbiology detail, these cells know what's good for them and they know what's bad for them. Now, Louis Gifford's work on the mature organisms model, as in much bigger organisms than single cellular, which I think we very much qualify in that category. It's the same thing. Pain is trying to tell us something. It's trying to tell us to move away from something. Now, in the drawers, walking into the drawers, it's telling you stop walking into drawers. It's a very, very simple mechanism. You fall off, you step off a curb and you roll your ankle, and the pain is there to tell you stop it. It's a mechanism to try and jerk that back, and hopefully the pain is there as protection, as designed to get you to stop doing anything silly. Now, sometimes you go too far and maybe you're off balance. You can't correct that. That's when you'll sprain your ankle, you'll get the inflammation. Now, that's easy if you've just broken your leg, and all these kind of examples that I'm giving. I think the definition still holds true for that, as in stop breaking your leg. That's that immediate response. There's also the role that pain plays in terms of if there is damaged tissues, which we've alluded to previously, then there's a response for healing straight away. Then we get into the kind of chronic pain bracket, which is actually being rebranded at the moment to persistent pain, which sounds just a little bit nicer. And that's categorization is anything longer than 6 weeks. And this is where we start getting into the more tricky elements of pain. And in its case of, well, what is there? What is pain? It's just telling us something in our life needs to change. Now, if we take your shoulder as an example, Sal, which is a really interesting one, we're going to go slightly off tangent here, if that's okay, Sal. But it's always the case of what was going on for you when that pain started. Had you just purely increased the load in your training? Were you a little bit run down at the time, which can be a factor? Had you been ill, for example? There's a massive correlation between your immune system and pain as well. Or was there something in life that had been, stressing you out, something on your mind a little bit? And these things they can be conscious, as the example, but they can be subconscious as well. And that's where we go to the more hidden stuff, which goes into stuff from our past. And we don't hold ourselves tense intentionally. We don't necessarily hold ourselves tense in certain areas on purpose, but we do, and there are reasons for that. That can be physical trauma, can be emotional trauma, emotional stress. I'm always intrigued as to where does PTSD, for example, post-traumatic stress disorder, where's that crossover between stress and trauma? I know trauma theoretically is held in different space in I think the frontal lobe or whatever it's called, so it feels very real and very current. But all of these things are reflected in our body over time. And to give you a really current example, I started at a new gym a couple of days ago, so I'm feeling the effects. I'm pretty sore today. And I've just been doing classes for a little while. So it's nice to just take control back and just work on my own things for a few months now. And I was really appreciating the gym I was working at previously didn't have mirrors, and I completely get the reasons for that. And that's great. But this one does have mirrors. I thought, you can imagine me, I'm very much a form geek, much like yourself, Sal, when we're training. And I was just doing a shoulder press in the mirror and just, that childlike curiosity that I have about everything. And I was just looking at how my rib cage was expanding as I was doing the shoulder press. And on the left side, it was really opening nicely, possibly too much. And on the right side, it was really kind of locked down. I'm like, ooh, I didn't know that. Where's that come from? And me being me, I was like, oh, was that from a previous injury, or was that from some old stuff, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I appreciate I've just gone off on a tangent there a little bit, but hopefully that goes in some way to answering your original question.
Yes, and it's such a huge field. We don't we respect the fact that we're sort of giving the entry level sound, sort of just understanding around pain. If you want to go deeper, yes, we can leave some links in the show notes to Louis Gifford. But pain is interesting. You're absolutely right, isn't it? It's information in many ways. It's a signal, it's a frequency, and it's an intense frequency that one would hear. And there's I think a cliche term that if you don't listen to the whispers in your body, you'll hear it when it screams. And in some ways, that's quite true. I see this with cases with people. Yeah, you probably see it. I see with burnout cases where people are working so hard and pushing so hard. And I might be coaching this individual. And I'm like, okay, so you know where this pathway is going, don't you? And I'll name it. But the pain can be superseded. Our brain is very, very capable of superseding physical and emotional pain if we perceive it's important. And I think this is one I want to sort of talk to you about. I don't know if this is in your space, but the meaning we make out of things. And I'm very interested in this field of semiotics, which is the blend of looking at emotions, affects, how we think and feel about something, what they mean. Because meaning is everything to humans. We are meaning creatures. If it means something to us, like do we love someone or do we care about, it matters. So the meaning pain has for an individual, which is whether it's psychological or physical, and if we stay with physical for your experiences, what does it mean? I think that's a really intriguing question that we can get into, because if it's, as you say, persistent pain, like my shoulder's persistent pain, what does it mean? So I'm going to be honest here. What does it mean? I'm going to just say this straight off the cuff. It's holding me back. It's stopping me from training. It's annoying me. So I'm actually very resistant to this. Now, if I put my sort of, let's say, Eastern understanding filter on, and I've said this a million times, resistance is suffering. Whatever we resist, it is suffering. So I'm resisting what's going on. And hence, there's probably a tightness in my architecture of my body. There's a tenseness in my thinking as well. And you alluded to already about if we're holding ourselves a particular way and we don't know, that's really intriguing. So what meaning are you seeing whether it's me or whether other people, what meaning do you see come out of, like, what does pain mean for this individual? What kind of themes are you seeing with your clients?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think, and again, that goes back to a point I mentioned earlier, and it being completely unique for every individual. I think if we maybe expound on your one, Sal, and then maybe move into some other examples that just crop up for me as we're chatting. I think in your case, I love your honesty there, and the frustration, the resilience, and the resistance, and that's very classic, and I'm sure that will resonate with the listeners. But for you, the bigger picture is you love training, and it's the fear of what you're missing out on, and kind of on a deeper level from our conversations, and I'm sure you've spoken about this before. It's important to your mental well-being as well. It might even be important to your social well-being. When you go training, you might meet friends at the gym, or you might have coffee with someone afterwards. So it becomes a big part of your life. And going back to our previous discussion on what pain is, that threat and that protection. If there's a threat, oh my God, let's take runners, because I know runners get a lot from this. And the catastrophization, which I'm sure you've spoken about on previous podcasts, Sal, but the brain will quickly go to, oh, this Achilles problem. Am I going to be able to do my race? Am I going to be able to run a PB? And then what happens if I can't run? And if I can't run, I'm not going to see my running friends. And if I don't go 6 anymore, what am I going to do with myself? And running is really important for my mental health. And then I'm just going to go insane. And I intentionally picked up my pace in my voice there to just try and give a sense of what happens in our brains, and we all do it. It's just kind of catching yourself doing it and noticing that you're doing it, and then just taking that step back. I think is really important. So yeah, I think I pretty much covered a lot of the bases there, really, just in one example and projecting on there.
Yeah, I'd say one more layer to that. So yeah, absolutely, there are these implications of what does it mean, and it means I can't do this, can't do that. Maybe see friends. Let's say, and I know runners, and they put a lot of work in to get to their race, and then suddenly, if there's an Achilles or a problem, what I also notice is, let's go another level deeper. Particularly, this is my lens of work. Is it's about your identity, who you are as a person. So I identify with training like an athlete, and that's how I identify. So if I cannot do that, that's potentially taking away a piece of my identity, which I care very much about, because we hold our identity close. So I wonder, and of course this sort of slips into the realm of different archetypal patterns, or what we call parts in psychology. Inner family systems is another model, but the aspects of self, one self wants to be training, one self is feeling a bit sore, wants to hide away. And I think this is where I see the disconnection. And this is why I'm interested to talk to you about another layer, about this disconnection between mind and body, or between the parts of ourself. And it seems to be, for some of us, we can get an injury because we're disconnected from our body, like forcing the body to do something when perhaps it doesn't want to. Or the other way is not giving your body the conditions of, say, exercise and activity, and it's becoming redundant. So that disconnection I see as a problem. Is there anything you're seeing with disconnection in people's bodies and their thinking self, their feeling self, that presents in a problem?
Yeah, I think. Oh gosh, this is another big one, Sal. And so forget too detailed. Do pull me up. I think there's two things that immediately spring to mind. I'll start on the first one. I'm fascinated by the catastrophization example I just gave. Would be more on an anxious spectrum. So someone who more associates with anxiety. We talk about body anxiety as a thing. That fear of what they've done to themselves and that kind of thing. There's also kind of like a bodily disassociation as well that can happen. And that is, I think, where I say, I think, because I really don't know. And obviously it's unique for everyone, but it's kind of like you have the mental capacity, and going back to you, probably because it's important for your self-worth and your overall, this is who I am, that you alluded to, but you have that ability to push through anything. And we're talking pain here. And we all have that. If you've just run a 26-mile marathon, you're absolutely on your knees, and a lion leaps out at you, what are you going to do? You're going to run faster than you've ever run in your life. There's that, I forget the name, it was 127 hours, something like that movie, where a guy got trapped in the outback in Australia, and he sawed his own arm off with a rusty penknife, because that was it. And he said it felt a bit weird, but he didn't feel pain, because his brain had decided that in order to keep him alive, it was more important that he didn't feel pain. So, absolutely fascinating. Now, going back to the disassociation, I think, and I'd put a lot of Olympic athletes in this bracket. I'd also put a lot of them in the anxiety bracket as well. It varies from person to person. But you can go through things to a point. And I've seen a lot of people over time where they have that ability, their overall goal for whatever that might be, Olympic gold, self-worth, mental health, even, trying to, personally, if I've got any mental health issues, I'm prone to overtraining myself. I've been there, got the t-shirt many times. But what you find with that disassociation is when the pain does start creeping in, when you don't seem able to zone out from it anymore, then there's quite a big kind of drop off. And actually, a lot of people I've seen who've previously been that then turn in the other way and become very anxious all of a sudden, because they're like, I can't control this anymore. My usual strategies aren't working. So yeah, seen quite a few interesting cases like that over the years. And it's almost, you've got to rebuild that confidence in the body in the self, and in sometimes you do have to address the underlying, okay, why were they doing that in the first place? And that self-worth, I keep referring to the big one for myself and a lot of us, I think. And so sometimes getting people like yourself on board, I have I have some very clever friends as well. If in the physical work we do pick out something a little bit more emotional, mental, then I have people that I can refer to as well.
Yeah, it's such an important point. I mean, a caveat for me, and I'll be really vulnerable and honest here, but one of the reasons I train is originally, it's kind of less lessons it's charged now, but originally was because I hated feeling weak. And it's a really revealing statement about sort of my psyche, but the feeling of weakness, and I have an autoimmune condition which sometimes will pull me down and crush me. The feeling of weakness is abhorrent for me. It's been a challenge. I've done loads of therapy on it, and it's a lot of work. It's a lot better for sure, and I'm in a lot better place, but that's the truth of it. And if anyone knows Brené Brown, the very world-famous shame researcher, a lot of her work and other people's too would point at, particularly for a man, weakness equals shame. So it can be that certainly if you're a man and you're training really hard, and are you training to get away from that? Now, of course, the flip of it as well, just to be on the positive, that I train for fun because there's a playful side in me and I love to move and play because hell, I feel like a kid again. It's brilliant. Certainly a north of 50. It's lovely to be able to feel childlike and youthful and vigorous. So it's about seeing these sides. And I think that's the work. I do a lot of self-work for sure, and I see it with my clients, but look at the shadow and look at the light, because both of them are probably part of the driving mechanisms behind why you might overtrain, why you might push through something, or why you might be stuck. If you don't look at that psychological architecture, it's like it's driving the bus, as the old expression goes. Now, I want to touch on something here that you mentioned about perhaps like athletes who may have had a difficulty and they've slid down into maybe more of an anxiety type response. If we think of the 4 Fs, flow, fight, flight, and freeze, the two sides of the nervous system, fight and flight, sympathetic, flow and freeze, parasympathetic. What I often see is that there's like a navigation point. We're neurologically somewhere in that response, and they're all healthy if we are appropriately responding to stimulus. But if you've been in fight response a lot, like pushing towards something, working really hard, so there's forward motion, and you have an injury or you have an autoimmune condition like I do, and like suddenly you can't train, it can slide you down into that anxiety place. Or for me, sometimes it's a shutdown. Like it's a retraction. It's people use the word depression, but I would call it shutdown. It's the shutdown state. And I think that's because my nervous system is responding to the experience and the meaning I'm giving it. What do you work with polyvagal theory in your work to some degree?
Very much so, Sal. My head had already gone there as you were chatting. Yeah.
Great. So if we use this lens, and I really love this lens because it's super easy to get. We got flow state when we're feeling socially engaged, we feel confident, we're really, life's just frictionless, it's lovely. Fight state is, and it's not aggression, we're talking about moving towards problems, solving problems, going towards the issue, heavy weight training, boxing, CrossFit, that's often fight state. All good. Flight state is generally moving away from the problem. So on the positive, it's like, yeah, I need to put the weights down now. I need to go home now. Or flight state negative is like, I don't want to deal with it. Anxiety chasing you down the road. And of course, freeze state at its positive realm is like, you need to quiet down, right? Put the weights down, go have a massage, go home, read a book, be quiet, rest. And that's the sort of more positive quality of it. Its darker quality is more of a depression quality, which you've already suggested you've been down that road. And at its worst state is trauma, when there's other qualities to it. So what are you seeing when people come into your space and they've got some stuff going on? Do you see them mapping through one of these neurological spaces?
Yeah. And I think, I've been doing this for, it's going to be 20 years in August for me. So when you've been lucky enough to spend time with, I don't know, 3, 4, 5,000 people in close proximity, you have a unique insight into the human condition. And I think it got to a point probably about 5 years ago where I meet the person for the first time in the reception area, and I take one look at them and I kind of know where they're at. I'm sure other professionals in my line of work, and particularly obviously even more so in the psychotherapy realm, will have a similar experience. Now, that's our initial judgment, and which is useful and it's instinctive for people like us. But we've also got to be wise that that's our initial indication. I think it's usually pretty accurate, but that's our judgment, and we have to remember that is a judgment, and then we need to modify that as we go. But I think the reason I love polyvagal theory is because it talks about our nervous system is just one nervous system at the end of the day, and all aspects of those flight, freeze, social engagement are active at any one time. And the best example I always use is sex. And it was the example that was given to me when I was first introduced to the concept. And it's, there's aspects of all parts of the nervous system in there. There's the obvious kind of arousal, which is that kind of excitement, that fight or flight the fight, I guess, really, in terms of what's going on. You're coming up. Then you also need that there's clearly social engagement as you look longingly into your partner's eyes. But also there's that the reptilian part of polyvagal theory that we talk about, the passiveness, which again, in its extreme form, is depression, in that you're letting someone in, you're being passive, and allowing someone to share your body as well. And that's just a really nice example of how, just in one example of life, that all parts of our nervous system are working together. And obviously that's in different states at any one time. But going back to your original question, and that initial kind of judgment, as we were kind of accurately saying on the person, is you make a judgment in terms of where they're more dominant on any given position. So if I meet someone and I'm like, yes, I'm absolutely fine, Jamie, there's no problem, that stress is absolutely fine, I haven't got any issues at all, you kind of know that they're a little bit flighty at the moment. And if their demeanor, and again, this probably comes across on the video version, not so much so, and I'll try and do the voice as well for the people just listening on audio. But I'm here, so I'm sorry for my existence, I've got this problem, sorry to trouble you, sorry for the sorry, that they're more on a depressive end of the scale there, and so you immediately pick up on those nuances. And then once we sit down and chat to them, get to know them, we get to know a little bit more about the detail, possibly the reasons why, get to understand how they are right now. Maybe that was just an initial coyness or a little kind of anxiety in meeting someone, or whether there's some more kind of underlying work. And of course, from my perspective, how that shows up in their body, because every emotion has a physical representation. So if you spend a long time in an emotion, that will shut down some parts of your body, maybe open up others, and that will undoubtedly be one of the things that's holding you in a pain pattern from my work.
Yeah, so interesting, isn't it? And I think that's something which I'm hoping as a listener we can take away, because something as simple as, what's the shape of your body? How are you carrying yourself right now? So if you're sitting, are you collapsed at your shoulders? Is your ribcage depressed? Is your chin tucked down? What does that feel like? If we think about your technology use, particularly a phone, most phone use invokes an anxiety/depression slight response. It's quite timid. It's collapsed in the chest. There's a lot of sort of inwardness to it. And of course, using a phone is a very abstract thing rather than an experiential thing that's around you. So the shape of your body language, and it's a space I've worked with quite a few people, like to change their body language in a way that's going to change how they present in the world and actually often present in front of people, is just as important as the psychology. In fact, many times more so, because it's embodied, right? It's an embodied cognitive state. So what I find interesting is that we can get very familiar with these states. I've seen it in my practice. It sounds like you're seeing it. We get identified with, and we often say it, don't we? You know, I'm an anxious person, or I have anxiety, or I have depression. And I'm not going to say that's not true. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying if we overly identify it, it becomes quite a familiar place. Whether we want that or not, it becomes our familiar. And we have to be very careful of the homeostatic gravity of the human system. We gravitate to homeostasis. And sometimes if it's been misaligned because of life's been tough for you, your upbringing's been tough, your gravity point might be a depressed quality because of the circumstances of your life, or an anxious because you've been around threats all of your life. So we're not saying that it's wrong, you're not having it, but if you're overly biased into that space, it does suggest there's opportunity to step into this other, let's say, neurological, emotional states of, and hands up. So another absolute raw example, you know, I when I grew up, I hated fighting, and there was problems at school when I was young, difficulties in my upbringing. In more recent years, in fact, last year, I started boxing, which is hilarious because I'm like, I've got to hit someone, I've got to hit things. And all right, I'm not that far down the road yet, but there is permission to be aggressive. There's permission for the fight state. And I think as a modality growing of certainly my system, taking an anxious person and giving them a fight state in safe, controlled environment is a very healthy thing. Because if you've always had to back down, if you've always been at threat, you need to turn the tables somehow. So we're not saying go and punch people. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying go get a safe way to understand fight. For someone else's weight training, because, you know, a heavy weight movement invokes you have to be aggressive with it. You have to really go for it. But if you're going through it with a conscious state, what I find is you're giving yourself permission to change state. And perhaps the person who's got a bit too much aggression because of their life story is taken that way, then how can we help you back off a little bit? How can we help you find a bit more safety without having to, be overly fight statey? So balance is seemingly the need. We need to be able to go reflexively into these states as appropriate, hopefully come out of them when they're not appropriate. And it's a big thing that I love to work with, because I've been through years of being in an anxious space, and then going to the flow state in yoga, just been a totally zenned out state. And now I actually am okay. I mean, it was the more heavy training disciplines and the psychological work which I've done that's helped me, stand up for yourself. It's okay. You can do that. And then there's that real, I feel more balanced now.
Yeah, I think it's very much so. Everything you said, and I think adaptability is the key. Having the ability to move in and around all of those nervous system states that we were talking about. Yeah, I often talk about it in this very room here, where you are on a theoretical, the floor's kind of like there, and that massive, and we're all on a sliding scale somewhere in there. We don't know exactly where it is. It's a theoretical scale. But when we're up here or down, we get stuck. And actually, we getting into the Gabor Mate stuff. All of our decisions are based on keeping our nervous system in the same way that it is accustomed to. Our choice of our jobs, the choice of our partners, these choices we make, which we think are active, conscious choices, and they are, but they manage to keep us in the way to which we've become accustomed from a nervous system perspective. So coming to change, it's about spending more time in those different states that you alluded to, Sal, and just to bring it back to my field in terms of the tissue side, the physical side, and it's that adaptability of the tissues. Can the tissues adapt? Yeah, you can slump and then you go, up in the air. But can you be everywhere in between that at the appropriate time? I think that's the really important work. And I think also, we've kind of mentioned around this already, but and this doesn't happen for all of my clients by any stretch, but the number of times I've seen people when I've done some physical work where we're working on something that's a little bit sticky, that evokes a specific emotion. I've had people say, "Oh, Jamie, that's my anxiety right there," or "Oh, that reminds me of this memory," or that's making me feel a bit funny in the tummy. My adrenal gland's going. And you can even trace that in certain people if their minds work that way, to very specific events. Now, obviously, if we're more traumatized people, you have to be careful not to re-traumatize them, which is possible. But as I've got more experience with that, what I've realized is that actually, if I'm in tune and listening to what they and their body are telling me, I'm watching for the signs, I'm feeling with my hands, my fingers, then nothing comes out that isn't ready to come out, which is a really lovely place for me to be able to say that. It's taken a lot of effort and a lot of hard work, and to have that.
I've been on the table, mate, so I can testify with you. So cool. So there's so much in this space. Of course, we don't have all the time in the world to share this, but we do. For me, and obviously Jamie, when you and I have spoken, outside of this conversation and today, it feels like if we can see the connections between our psychological architecture, who we think we are, beliefs and all those things, our emotional experience, or how do we feel, our neurological state, like name it, where am I? Do I feel safe? Do I feel like I want to move towards the problem? Do I want to get out of here? Do I want to just shut down? This self-awareness grows and it expresses physiologically in the muscles, in the tissues, in the fascia, in the movement patterns that we see. And if, my dear listener, you are in pain, struggling, you've got some physical stuff going on, or you're sort of tapping on my door and you think it's more psychological, you need to go to both doors. You need to see Jamie, you need to see someone like me, because actually when we work on the whole system, and I'll cycle back, this is one of my big hopes for the sharing of this education, that we are systemic creatures. We do not work in isolation. Thoughts affect the physiology, and the physiology affects the thoughts, and it's one ecosystem of impact and influence. So if you're having issues, make sure you're speaking to someone who understands this more nuanced and integrated approach, because it's likely to be happening for you as it was for me, as it is for many of us. Jamie, I'd like to summarize for this conversation. What are the final thoughts you might share about how one might think about their dealing with their physical self and their psychological self that you see? What's some of the things you'd like to finish on a sharing point for us?
Yeah, I think I'd like to finish on a message of hope, really. And again, I'm sure, I know we've both been there, Sal, and in those hopeless situations, and it's driven what we've done, and people get into this stuff for purely self-interest, let's be honest. But yeah, it's if something's not working for you, you're the captain of the ship. And we've all had tough things that have gone on in our lives, and some more than others. And I've been relatively lucky in my life, and obviously a lot of people have shared a lot of things with me on the treatment couch just over there. So I've got an array of an idea of what the world looks like out there. So it's just trying different things. And if you're not happy with where you are right now, do something different. You alluded to, see both of us, obviously. And if it doesn't work with either of us, see someone else. There's always different options out there. Myself and Sal, we love what we do, and we're always continually learning. There's always more stuff out there. But it's fascinating that sometimes the emphasis might need to be more emotional and psychological, and sometimes the emphasis might need to be more physical. Sometimes I've had people who've done a whole raft of psychological work on themselves, and I just do a few of my party tricks, and all of a sudden they're reborn. And it's almost like it's too easy. And then the flip side is that maybe the person I alluded to earlier, where it's not their knee, it's their whole life that's the problem. And I'm beavering away, I'm doing my usual things, looking at the whole body, trying to address the biomechanics, and their body's just not releasing in the way that I want to, despite my best intentions. And for those people, something, they need to do something differently. They need to address the psychological aspect as a way in. And then, everything in between, where if you can work in parallel with the psychological and the physical at the same time, and one might open up another. which is the truth as far as I see it. In terms of what can we do? What would be my tip from a physical level? And you're going to love this, Sal. Sal hasn't paid me for this, by the way, listeners. Breathwork is not the answer to everything, but even from a biomechanical perspective, it is very much at the source of everything. I won't bore you with details. If you want to look at the work of the anatomy trainers guys, I suggest you do that online. There's a little bit of on our website as well. So it kind of, for me, it works on nervous system level as well. Like I say, biomechanically, diaphragms continues with the hip flexors and ramifications onwards. Really holding myself back on detail there. So yeah, so certainly that would be a take-home message, that message of hope, the message of the connectedness of the physicality and that emotional ability of the body to physically store those emotions, and then breath work as a nice all-rounder for all of us. We all have to breathe. When we breathe slower, when we breathe out more than we breathe in, it calms us down. When we breathe out in more than we breathe out, it perks us up. There's a fundamentality about that.
Yeah. Thank you, Jamie. Yeah, really nice summary points. Yes, we are coming to the end of our show. Breathwork is an entire other subject. Jamie, maybe you'll come back on and we'll talk biomechanics.
Biomechanics of breathwork. There you go.
Fantastic tool. Yeah. So, and actually, I'll be putting some content on my website soon. So if you're listening to this, have a quick peek at the website. There's probably likely to be something on there around the breathwork piece, which you can hopefully dig into. So yeah, just go to the website, look at the show notes. The details will be in there. Dear listener, as always, I say this every time and I'll say it again. If something in this has piqued your interest, caught your attention, rewind, write it down, use AI. Don't care how you do it, but capture the knowledge and use it. It is yours to implement. I hope it changes something in your world, and I hope it changes something in your thinking and your feeling as well. So, Jamie, thank you for coming on and sharing your utter brilliant wisdom today. We basically need an entire day to unpack your mind, probably more, but it's probably the start point for our listener. Thank you so much, dear listener. Take care until the next one. I'll see you soon. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe. And if a friend would benefit from hearing this, do send it on to them as well. If you would like to get in touch yourself, then you can go to my website, which is saljeffreys.com, spelled SALJEFFERIES, saljeffreys.com. Hit the Get in Touch link, and there you can send me a direct message. If you'd like to go one step further and learn whether coaching can help you overcome a challenge or a block in your life, then do reach out and I offer a call where we can discuss how this may be able to help you. Until the next time, take care.